In Maplecroft, a quiet woman in worn boots was about to turn a family gathering into a reckoning. What began as a casual Sunday barbecue took a shocking turn when she pulled out a set of keys and a long-buried truth. Elara Quinn wasn't just the poor relative. For 12 years, she'd cared for others in silence, known for her patience and humility. When a dog uncovered a hidden panel on the porch, Elara realized it was time. What began as dismissal ended in revelation. The house and her family would never look at her the same again. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Baymere had never looked more golden. The coastal wind rolled in soft and salted, tugging gently at the lace veil that crowned Elara Quinn's dark hair. From her perch just behind the wooden archway, framed by hydrangeas and woven seagrass, she could see the crowd of smiling faces gathered on the lawn below. The Quinn family's old estate sat proudly on the hill, white paint freshened for the occasion. Guests murmured, laughed, and snapped photos. Everything, finally, had settled. She touched the pendant around her neck, her grandmother's, and exhaled. She hadn't expected to feel so calm. After all the years of grief, guilt, and rebuilding, here she was, seconds from stepping forward, from marrying Jonah Rhodes, the man who had seen her through the worst and loved her still. "Al," whispered Mara from behind, voice clicked. "They're ready." Elara turned. Her mother was dressed in slate gray, not a trace of emotion on her elegant face. That wasn't surprising. Mara Quinn had never been the type for tears or softness. She was statuesque and cold and immovable, the kind of woman who buried her son without a funeral. Still, something in Mara's eyes now, something unreadable, gave Elara pause. "El," came Jonah's voice, warm and steady from up front. She looked toward the altar. There he was, her Jonah, waiting. A school teacher with a farmer's strength in his shoulders and a priest's patience in his eyes. He smiled. Elara stepped forward. The music swelled, violins rising in harmony as the guests turned in their seats. Her heart picked up. One step, another, down the petal-strewn aisle, past childhood friends, neighbors, teachers, all of them witnesses to this new beginning. Then, a voice. Low, ragged, and real. "Elara." She froze. The crowd purned, craning their necks toward the back of the aisle. Elara blinked. The light flickered. A man stood in the entryway, backlit by the sun. Tall, gaunt, hair longer now, streaked with gray at the temples. A shadow of someone she once knew, until he stepped forward and the world tilted. Callan. Her brother. Her dead brother. Gasps rippled through the crowd like a stone thrown into still water. Jonah took a step down from the altar, disbelief stamped across his face. Elara couldn't breathe. Callan's eyes locked onto hers. His mouth opened, closed. There were no words, only years of distance and loss etched into the deep lines of his face. He looked haunted, not just older, but worn thin by something heavier than time. "El," he tried again, but Elara swayed. The sun blurred. Her knees gave out. Darkness came rushing. She woke inside the house, the ceiling spinning above her. "El, Elara," Jonah's hand on hers. "You fainted." She sat up too fast. "Callan, where is he?" Jonah's expression hardened. Gone. Disappeared before anyone could stop him. "What?" "I tried. I got in front of him, asked what the hell he was doing. He wouldn't answer.
He looked right through me, then ran. Elara pulled the blanket off her lap, standing. He's alive, Jonah. He was right there. I know. No, you don't. You didn't see his face. He's not okay. Jonah stepped back, jaw tight. He showed up and blew apart your wedding. No explanation, no apology, and you're defending him? She faltered. I'm not defending him. I need to understand. Understand what, Elara? That he let you think he was dead for 7 years? He didn't wait for an answer. He left the room. Later that night, after the guests had been ushered out and the tent packed away, Elara sat alone in the garden with a cup of untouched tea. Her mother stood at the edge of the porch, silhouetted by the glow of the porch light. You knew, Elara said quietly, didn't you? Mara didn't reply. You knew he might be alive, that he hadn't drowned. A long silence. Mara finally spoke, her voice quiet but steel-threaded. I never believed the sea took him. Elara turned. Why didn't you say anything? Because hope is a slow poison, and you were healing. I wasn't going to infect you with what I couldn't prove. That wasn't your choice to make. No, her mother admitted. It wasn't. Elara swallowed back the tightness in her throat. What happened that night? Mara's gaze didn't waver. If you want to know, talk to Declan Merritt. The cop? Your brother's old friend. He was the last one to see Callan alive. And with that, Mara turned and disappeared into the house. The river flowed on, indifferent to their troubles. But Elara knew the peace of its surface was an illusion, like the calm she'd tried to build here in Baymere. It could be shattered in an instant. And it had been. The only question now was whether she'd find the truth buried in its depths or drown chasing it. Elara, Declan Merritt said, straightening from where he'd been leaning on the hood of his cruiser. The Quinn family boathouse stood just behind her, its whitewashed walls flaking under years of salt air, the same place where Callan had launched his final voyage, or so everyone thought. Elara stepped forward, arms crossed tightly against the cold that hadn't come from the weather. Mom said you were the last person to see him.
Declan nodded, his face unreadable. He'd aged since high school. Broader now, his jaw shadowed with stubble, but his eyes still carried that same nervous earnestness he'd had at 17. I was, he said. We talked that night, just before the storm came in. What about? He hesitated. Stuff. The kind you don't talk about at weddings. I'm not married, Elara said, sharper than intended. Declan winced. Right, I heard. I'm sorry. Silence stretched. The breeze pushed at the grass, rustling the edges of memory. He wasn't acting right, Declan continued quietly. Not drunk, not high, just jumpy, paranoid, like someone was after him. He said he needed to disappear. You believed him? I thought he was spiraling. He asked me not to follow him down to the water. A pause. So I didn't. Elara stepped closer. You wrote a report, didn't you, after the boat washed up? I did, but I kept a copy of my notes. I didn't trust the way it ended. He opened the cruiser door, pulled a worn leather folder from the glove box. Inside were lined pages with looping handwriting. Elara, your brother left behind a duffel bag, half-packed. No wallet, no phone, but this, Declan pointed to a name scrawled in the margin. Lucian Vale. At the time, I thought it was a story. Now, it's who he is now, Elara whispered, chills prickling her skin. Declan studied her face. You really saw him? Yes. And you're sure it wasn't a hallucination or... She cut him off with a look. He stood in front of me, Declan, alive, and he knew what he was doing. Declan nodded slowly. Then you're going to need help. That night,
Elara sat at the kitchen table, the folder open in front of her. Rain ticked against the windows. The lights were dimmed, casting long shadows across the counters where Mara had once packed school lunches and Callan had told ghost stories to scare her. So many nights spent missing him, mourning him, and now anger had taken grief's place. Her mother entered, robe drawn tight around her. "I thought you'd be asleep." "I know his name now, Lucien Vale." "Then you know more than I did." "Stop it! You knew something. You felt he wasn't dead. You told me that." "I felt it," Mara said, her voice distant. "That's different from knowing." "Then tell me what happened that night. All of it." Mara's shoulders lifted, then slowly dropped. "I heard Callan leave after dark. I watched from this window. He didn't look back. He moved like someone being followed. I didn't stop him." "Why not?" "Because I'd already lost him, long before that night." The words hit like a slap. Elara swallowed. "What do you mean?" "He changed after that trip to Linth. That city twisted him. He came back different, angry, secretive. There was a darkness in him I didn't recognize." "You let him disappear." "I let him choose." "No, Mom. You let me mourn him. You stood at my side while I sobbed at a fake gravesite." Mara's voice cracked for the first time. "Because it was the only way I could keep you safe." Elara froze. "Safe from what?" Mara shook her head. "Ask your brother."
Later, in her old bedroom, Elara stared at the ceiling while the storm outside picked up speed. Her mind kept circling one phrase in Declan's notes. Lucien Vale. Not a name, a mask. But who's he hiding from? The answer, she suspected, wasn't a what, it was a who. She pulled out her phone, searched for Lucien Vale plus Linth plus art. The results were sparse. An avant-garde exhibit from 2 years ago, a blurry interview and an underground zine. But one name kept appearing beside his, Beau Linvale, founder of something called the Collective. Her pulse quickened. She didn't know what the Collective was yet, but she knew where she had to go next. By morning, her suitcase was packed. Baymere was no longer the center of the story. Linth awaited. The train pulled into Linth just after noon, its steel belly groaning against the rails. Elara stepped onto the platform and immediately felt the shift, the coastal breeze of Baymere replaced by a humid, smoky air that clung to the skin. The city smelled of paint thinner, coffee grounds, and old metal. A nervous energy pulsed through its streets like a second heartbeat. Linth wasn't just different from Baymere, it was alive in ways that felt almost threatening. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. "Declan, be careful. Linth's not Baymere. Watch your back." She didn't reply. He wasn't wrong. With a folded map in hand and Declan's notes tucked into her bag, she headed toward the gallery listed in her search results the night before, Threadbare Studio, a space known for underground installations and fringe performances. Lucien Vale's name had appeared in its past event listings, once or twice, always buried near the bottom. The studio was nestled on a narrow street in the crumbling industrial district. Graffiti climbed the bricks like ivy. A rusted sign hung from the doorframe, the word threadbare scrawled in mismatched lettering. Inside, the air was thick with turpentine and unfinished ideas. Elara hesitated in the doorway, eyes adjusting to the dim lighting. The gallery space was raw. Exposed beams, concrete floors, canvases popped against walls like abandoned thoughts. A woman behind a folding desk looked up. She was tall and lean, her buzzed hair dyed the color of rust. A tattoo of a moth wrapped around her wrist. "You lost?" Elara stepped forward.
I'm looking for someone. He used to show here. Lucian Vale. The woman's gaze sharpened. You a cop? No, I'm his sister. A pause. Then, you sure about that? Yes. Another pause. Then the woman stood. Follow me. They passed under an archway covered in hanging wire and black cloth. In the back, paintings lined the walls, bold, chaotic, unmistakably emotional. One large piece dominated the room, an abstract swirl of charcoals and reds, jagged lines bleeding into one another. Elara felt something pull at her ribs. I remember this one, she whispered. You've seen his work before? No, she said softly. I've felt it before. The woman watched her, measuring. I'm Tara, she said finally. I used to work the late installs. Lucian didn't talk much, but he left a trail. She opened a filing cabinet, rifled through a drawer, and handed Elara a flyer. An exhibit from a year ago, Echo Without Anchor, curated by Lucian Vale. Beneath the title, an address. He doesn't come here anymore. He's removed. But that's the last known place he curated from. Studio space, private. You didn't get that from me. Why? Because no one touches Lucian unless they want a shadow following them home. He's not just some recluse, he's part of something bigger. And some of us like keeping our heads attached. The building listed on the flyer stood at the edge of Lint's Arts District, where urban decay met desperate gentrification. Rows of lofts and abandoned warehouses were interspersed with pop-up galleries and bohemian cafes. It was beautiful in a kind of broken way. Elara stood at the foot of a graffiti-covered stairwell, second-guessing everything. She knocked. No answer. She knocked again. Footsteps. Then the door opened a crack and a woman peered out. Short, dark hair, sharp features, wary eyes. Alara's breath caught. Lena Dorsey. Callan's partner. The woman from the wedding. You need to leave, Lena said flatly. I came to talk. You made your point in Bay Mere. I didn't come to destroy anything. I just need to know why. Lena opened the door another inch. Why he left, or why he stayed gone? Both. Lena studied her for a moment, then sighed, stepping aside. Inside, the loft was spare but lived in. Canvases leaned against the walls, sketchbooks stacked along the edges of a paint-splattered table. In one corner, a wall of Polaroids, most blurry, some haunting, showed faces Elara didn't recognize. None were Callan's. Lena poured coffee into 2 mismatched mugs and handed one over. Why are you really here? I want to understand. No, you want closure. There's a difference. Elara stared at her. You know what it's like to lose him? I never lost him. You did. And you buried him, held a funeral, said goodbye. I didn't have a choice. Neither did he. That hit harder than she expected. Where is he? Out, Lena said. And if he walks through that door and sees you here, he'll walk right back out again. He spent 7 years building a life without ghosts. I'm not a ghost. I'm his sister. You're exactly a ghost, Lena said, leaning forward. You haunt him. The silence that followed was dense with unsaid things. Elara didn't respond. Couldn't. Lena finally softened. Look, I don't hate you, but you coming here, it's not neutral. People notice. People ask questions. Questions that get back to Beau. Elara. A voice called from the hallway. Heavy, rough, unmistakable. Callan. Lena stood suddenly, tense. The front door swung open. He stepped in, taller than she remembered, hair longer, face lined in ways that had nothing to do with age. His eyes met hers, and for a moment, time cracked open. Elle, he breathed. Elara stood, Hi, Callan. The moment shattered. His face hardened. You shouldn't be here. I had to come. You showed up and disappeared like it was nothing.
I had my reasons. Then explain them. He looked at Lena, then back at Elara. I can't. You owe me. I don't, he said, voice low but firm. I died for a reason, and if you keep digging, you'll find out why that's the only thing that's kept you safe. Ilara's voice trembled. Safe from what? Go home, Elara, he said. Before this goes places it can't come back from. He turned to leave. She grabbed his arm. Callan, please. His eyes flared with something between pain and fear. You don't know what you've stepped into. Elara let go. Callan disappeared down the hallway. Lena didn't speak, and Elara stood there, heart pounding, more certain than ever. This wasn't just a story of a man who ran. It was the story of someone being hunted. Later that night, as she sat alone in a budget motel on Linth's East End, Elara took out the flyer again. Her fingers traced the curve of Callan's new name. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Lucian Vale. A mask, and she was just starting to understand what it was hiding. Marcus's hand hovered just over the doorknob, but he didn't turn it. The name, Lucian Vale, was still scrawled in black marker outside the mailbox. Not Elara Quinn, not the boy who taught her how to skip stones or stayed up reading horror stories to her under the blanket during storms. That boy had drowned, at least on paper. This man, this stranger, was something else entirely. Elara knocked again, softer this time. The door opened. Lena Dorsey didn't say a word. She simply stepped aside, arms crossed, eyes sharp. Elara entered. The loft was still as she remembered. Angular shadows cast by exposed pipes, unfinished canvases leaning like secrets against the walls, a faint smell of linseed oil and metal. Elara's boots echoed faintly on the wood floors as she moved to the center of the space. You shouldn't be here, Lena said, voice cooler than before.
I didn't come to fight, Elara said. I came because I need to understand. You mean dig? Elara turned. You knew who I was the second you saw me at the wedding. You could have told me something. Anything. I could have, Lena agreed. But what would you have done with it? Rushed to the police? Dragged him back to Baymere for some family reunion therapy session? Elara's jaw tightened. He left us. He let us believe he was dead. You don't get to decide what we deserve to know. And you don't get to decide what he needed to survive, Lena snapped. Before Elara could answer, the front door creaked open behind them. Callan stepped inside, sweat on his brow, dark hair damp from the humidity. He froze when he saw Elara standing in the room. Elle, he said quietly. She swallowed. I didn't come to make a scene. You already did, he replied, closing the door behind him. They stared at each other for a long moment. In his face, she saw the boy he used to be, flashes of it, buried beneath sharper edges. He looked older than 31, with eyes that had seen things she hadn't even begun to imagine. You shouldn't be here, he said again. That seems to be the theme. I mean it. So do I. Silence. Lena drifted toward the back of the loft, giving them space, or just giving herself distance. You disappeared, Elara said, voice shaking now. You died, Callan. You let me stand there while they lowered an empty casket. You let Mom break in ways I still don't think she's come back from. I had to. You could have told us. I couldn't, he interrupted, because if I had, someone would have come looking, and that would have gotten people hurt. Who? Beau? His reaction gave her the answer she needed. Beau's dangerous, Callan admitted. But it's not just him. It's everything he's tied to. You don't know what you're walking into. Then tell me. Make me understand. He rubbed his face, visibly tired. For a moment, Elara thought he might actually sit down and try. Instead, he walked toward the far end of the room, opened a drawer, and pulled out a cigarette. He lit it, even though Elara had never known him to smoke. "You remember what it was like after Dad died?" he said suddenly. "How quiet it got in the house?" She blinked at the abrupt shift. "Of course." "Mom," she stopped speaking in full sentences. "You and we were just filling space." Elara nodded slowly, unsure where he was going. He said, "I left because I had to get away from more than Bamir. I left because someone gave me a choice. Stay, and everything I love burns, or disappear and maybe save it." "Who gave you that choice?" He didn't answer. "Kellen, did Bo threaten you?"
"I don't know if it was a threat," he said. "It was an offer. A trade." Her voice trembled. "A trade for what?" Colin took a long drag and exhaled smoke toward the ceiling. "For your life," he said quietly. Elara froze. 7 years ago, I got pulled into something I didn't understand. Art, yes, but also money, laundering, deals that went far beyond paintings on walls. I thought I was clever. I wasn't. I pissed off the wrong people. And one night I was told I had 2 options: disappear or watch it all come crashing down on you and Mom. "You think you were protecting us," Elara said slowly, "but you destroyed us instead." "I know." He finally looked at her. His eyes were red. "I thought if I built a life here, if I stayed hidden, maybe eventually you'd forget. Maybe it'd be better. But you came back." Colin looked away. "I didn't mean to." Elara narrowed her eyes. "Then why did you?" Colin hesitated. The pause was long enough that Lena re-entered the room, as if she sensed he was about to say something he shouldn't. "He didn't." Instead, he muttered, "It doesn't matter." "It does," Elara said, stepping toward him. "You showed up at my wedding. You stood there and watched. Why?" He flinched. "I needed to see if you were happy," he said finally. "And were you satisfied with what you saw?" "No," he whispered. "You look like someone who hadn't grieved properly, like someone who learned to wear pain as politeness." Elara blinked hard, her breath catching in her throat. Colin took a step back. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice low, "but you have to go." She opened her mouth, but Lena cut in. "He's not safe while you're here," she said softly. "They're watching." "They?" Colin didn't answer. Instead, he walked to the back window and stared out at the alley below. "Go home, Elara," he said again. She turned to leave, but just before the door closed behind her, Colin said, "The river isn't what drowns you. It's the weight you carry into it." She didn't respond. Outside, the city buzzed with life, but Elara's pulse was quiet. She'd found her brother, and she was starting to understand why he'd never wanted to be found. The night air in Linth clung like damp velvet, thick with city grit and the hum of after-dark energy. Elara leaned against a brick wall across from Colin's loft, her coat pulled tight. The street was mostly quiet, at least to the untrained eye, but her instincts were sharper now. Linth was never quiet. It just paused to listen.
She watched as shadows passed behind the tall windows of the studio. Callan hadn't left all day. Neither had Lena. Elara hadn't dared return since the argument, but that hadn't stopped her from circling, watching, trying to understand what her brother was so afraid of. A low hum of tires pulled her attention down the street. A sleek gray sedan slowed at the corner, lingered for a beat too long, then rolled on. She didn't recognize the car, but she noted the license plate, another detail in a growing list. "Elara!" The voice startled her. Declan Merritt stepped out from the alley behind her, hands in the pockets of his jacket, expression unreadable. "You followed me," she said. "I stayed behind in Bamir for 3 days hoping you'd call. You didn't. So yeah, I came to find you." Elara glanced across the street again.
I found him, Declan. He's alive, and he's scared. Declan's eyes followed her gaze. Does he want to come home? She didn't answer. That's what I thought, he said, quietly. They stood in silence for a moment, the city pressing in around them. I need your help, she said finally. He's not just hiding, he's being kept. There's something else, someone else controlling this. You're talking about Beau Linvale? She looked at him. How do you know that name? I never stopped digging, Elle. After the accident, things never added up. The currents that night were weak, no real damage to the boat, no signs of a struggle. I talked to a dock worker a week later. He mentioned seeing Callan arguing with a man, tall, tattoos, expensive coats. The name he gave was Linvale. Elara's pulse quickened. Why didn't you say anything? I did, to your mother. She told me to let it go. Elara's face paled. Of course she did. Declan glanced back at the loft. If Callan's involved with Beau, it's bad. Linvale's at sealed records. Nothing sticks to him, but everyone in Linth knows. He doesn't just run an art scene, he runs people. Elara exhaled. Then we find out what he's using to control Callan. Declan hesitated. There's something else. A warehouse in the industrial district. Callan's name, or rather Lucian Vale's, is tied to the lease. I pulled it from the property records before I left. Elara straightened. Can you get us in? He pulled out a key card. Already did. The warehouse stood in the shadow of Linth's skeletal rail system, framed by graffiti-covered shipping containers and rusted fencing. Declan swiped the card at a side entrance. The lock buzzed. The door creaked open. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of oil, ink, and mildew. A single hanging bulb cast long shadows over the concrete floor. Canvases were stacked along the walls, half-finished, abstract, and disturbing. Faces without eyes, mouths sewn shut, smoke rising from beds of ash. It's like, Elara whispered, trailing her fingers along one, like memories being smothered. Declan walked ahead, shining a flashlight. There's more in the back. They entered a smaller room, one without windows. On the floor lay a spread of journals, sketchbooks, writings, torn scraps. Elara crouched, flipping through one, her brother's handwriting. The night on the boat wasn't the escape, it was the transaction, a life in exchange for silence. Lena warned me not to trust Beau, but I already owed him. If I go back, she dies. Elara's stomach twisted. She looked up at Declan. She? Declan frowned. You think he meant Lena? No, she said, slowly, her heart racing. I don't.
From the other room, a soft creak echoed. They both froze. Footsteps. They weren't alone. Declan drew the small flashlight into his palm like a baton and motioned toward the exit. But the figure that appeared in the doorway wasn't a stranger. It was Lena. Her face was pale, eyes wild with fury. I told you to stay away. Elara rose slowly. How did you know we were here? I followed you, just like you followed Callan. Do you get it yet? Every time you dig, you put him in danger. You think I'm the problem, Elara snapped. You helped him fake his death. You let a family grieve while you built a life with him. We didn't build a life. We built a containment zone, Lena hissed. You think this was a romance? A rescue? No. We survive day to day. We watch every phone call, every shadow. We stay quiet so Beau doesn't decide we've outlived our usefulness. Elara stepped closer. Then why protect him? Why stay? Lena's voice broke. Because he's the only family I have left too. The three of them stood there in the stillness, the city noise muffled beyond concrete walls. Elara bent down and picked up a scrap of paper near the journal. A sketch. A woman, her face blurred by frantic pencil strokes, holding a child. Behind them, a shape loomed in the background. Broad shoulders, sharp features, a man in shadow. Elara turned it toward Lena. Who is this? Lena's jaw clenched. You're not ready for that answer. Try me. Lena looked down.
She was 16 when Callan found her. He took her in, got her out of Linth, put her somewhere safe. That's why he disappeared. Elara stared. A girl? She's not in the country anymore, Lena whispered. He made sure of that. But Bo knows, and if Callan talks, if he steps out of line, that girl disappears. Or worse. Elara swayed slightly. He didn't fake his death for himself. He did it to protect her. And to protect you, Lena added. But now you're here, digging, unraveling. Bo knows. That fire at the boathouse, that was a warning. Alara's chest tightened. Declan stepped forward. Then help us. Testify. We'll bring Bo down. Lena laughed. Sharp, bitter. You don't bring down men like Bo. You outlast them. Or you disappear. Elara met her gaze. Not this time. Outside, sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Somewhere in the city, lines were shifting. And in that warehouse, surrounded by secrets, sketches, and truths too long buried, Elara Quinn made a decision. She wouldn't run. She wouldn't hide. She would drag the past into the light, even if it scorched everything left standing. The invitation arrived on rough cardstock, hand-delivered through the mail slot at Elara's rented Linth apartment. No return address, just a time, a date, and a location scrawled in bold black ink. Midnight, 145 West Mercer. Come alone, -BL. Elara turned the card over. Nothing. No message, no threat, just the promise of something waiting in the dark.
When she knocked, it swung inward without a sound. A man in a sleeveless black hoodie nodded, didn't speak, just gestured her forward down a narrow hall lit by bare bulbs, the air rich with smoke and oil paint. Murals bled from the walls, raw and confrontational, scenes of drowning men, distorted families, faceless crowds. Each one screamed something Elara couldn't yet name. She was led into a vast, dimly lit chamber, part gallery, part theater. People lounged on mismatched couches, leather chairs, the floor itself. Every surface was splattered with color, protest, passion. The atmosphere felt charged, electric, a heartbeat away from eruption. At the center stood Bo Linvale. He was taller than she remembered from the photos, lean, elegant, but with a predator's stillness. He wore a long black coat and rings on nearly every finger. When he smiled, it was without warmth. "Elara Quinn," he said, spreading his arms like a host welcoming a sacrificial lamb. "You made it. I admire that." She kept her distance. "You know who I am. I make it my business to know everything about the people I control," Bo said mildly. "Sit, or don't. Either way, you came here for answers." "I came here because you've been using my brother like a pawn, and I want to know why." Bo didn't flinch. Instead, he gestured to the perimeter of the room, where his so-called collective gathered, watching, listening, waiting. "These people," Bo said, "are survivors. They've come from broken systems, dead-end lives, violent histories. And what do I give them? A voice, a canvas, power. Power built on fear," Elara shot back. "On truth, the kind, polite society refuses to look at. Callan, Lucian, he understood that. He saw what this world does to people like us. That's why his work matters." Elara narrowed her eyes. "You don't protect him. You own him. You blackmailed him into silence." Bo's smile flickered, then vanished. "You're more like your brother than you realize. You see too much. That's dangerous." From the shadows, a spotlight clicked on. A lone performer entered the space, face painted white, eyes rimmed in black. They moved silently, painting on a canvas as music swelled, distorted lullabies over thunderous percussion. Images emerged, fragments of violence, a child hiding beneath floorboards, a woman burning photographs.
The crowd was still. Elara stood, heart pounding. "What is this?" "A confession," Bo whispered. "Our art is truth made flesh. Sometimes the only way to survive memory is to transform it." Elara stared at the image forming under the spotlight. It was unmistakable. The Quinn family boathouse, burning. Her fists clenched. "You're playing games!" Bo turned toward her, eyes glinting. "No, I'm making an offer." He walked slowly around her, voice low. "Go home, Elara. Marry your safe little fiancé. Pretend your brother died a tragic death. Let the myth stand. Or—" he paused. "Stay. Help us build something that means more than lies. Use your story. Let it bleed." Elara walked around the room, faces mesmerized, blank, broken. Not all of them were here by choice. "You're not liberating anyone. You're just collecting ghosts." Bo's expression darkened. "Then be careful, Miss Quinn. You're one tragic decision away from becoming one of them." Suddenly, movement at the rear of the room. Lena. She pushed through the crowd, ignoring the gasps. "Elara," she snapped, grabbing her arm. "We're leaving." Elara didn't move. "You came here?" "I had to," Lena hissed. "I warned you. You think Bo just lets people walk away? This is a trap, not a gallery." Bo raised a brow. "Lena, I didn't know you still had loyalty left in you." "I don't," she said, steady. "I'm loyal to Callan, and he's done paying your price." Two of Bo's men stepped forward, tense. Lena reached into her coat and pulled out a small flash drive. "You touch either of us, this goes public. Every video, every audio file Callan collected. All your dirty laundry, offshore accounts, backroom deals, disappearances."
Boo's eyes flicked to Elara. "He trusted you with that?" "No," Lena said. "He trusted her." And just like that, Elara saw it. A shift in Bo's posture. A flash of calculation. Fear. He stepped back. "Leave," he said coolly. "But remember this. Truth is a fire. It burns what you love first." They didn't wait. Lena pulled Elara out through a side exit, down a narrow alley, then into the street. Only when they reached Elara's car did either of them speak. "You had that the whole time?" Elara asked, breathless. "I wasn't sure you were ready for it. But after tonight, maybe we both are." Elara slid into the driver's seat. Her hands trembled. "You risked everything coming here." "So did you," Lena said softly. They sat for a moment watching the lights of the city flicker. "Callan needs out," Lena said, at last. "And if we don't pull him, no one will." Elara nodded. "Then we start tomorrow." As the engine hummed to life, neither of them saw the figure watching from the rooftop across the street. Bo Linvale wasn't done, but neither was Elara Quinn.
A page torn halfway out. Then another sketch, this one of Elara, drawn from memory. She looked younger, hopeful, standing near the ocean, barefoot, wind in her hair. Underneath, one line. "I kept going because I remembered how she said my name when no one else did." Tears blurred her vision. She flipped further ahead. The entries changed tone, more frantic, more calculated, like Callan had begun preparing for something. December 10th. Bo wants to bring Elara into the collective. He saw one of her poems online, said she writes like she's already been hollowed out. I told him she's just grief in motion. He smiled and said that was perfect. That was the moment I started copying files, emails, ledgers, voice notes, just in case. If this ends badly, and I know it will, I want Elara to have everything. Because the lie I built, it wasn't to protect me, it was to give her a life outside this. Elara stared at the last entry dated 2 months before he walked into her wedding. It was only 3 words. She's not safe. A knock at the door snapped her back to the present.
Not the door to her apartment, her internal door. The one she kept shut on everything too painful to face. Lena's voice echoed in her memory. Callan needs out, and if we don't pull him, no one will. Elara rose, notebook in hand. She now had proof. Beau's operation, his threats, the extent of his manipulation. But she also had something more dangerous. Callan's guilt. And guilt could either be weaponized or healed. She grabbed her phone, dialed Declan. "Meet me," she said. "I have what we need." "Are you sure?" he asked, voice tight. "Because once this starts, there's no going back," she finished for him. "I know." Before she could hang up, Declan added, "Jonah's looking for you, said he tried calling." Elara hesitated. "Tell him I'm okay." That's not what he wants to hear. "No," she said quietly, "but it's the only truth I can give him right now." She hung up. As she stepped into the hall, a familiar figure was waiting at the bottom of the stairs. Lena. "You read it?" she asked. Elara nodded. "Then you understand now," Lena said. "This isn't just about your brother. It's about what they'll do next. Beau doesn't stop. He replaces." Elara met her gaze. "Then let's make sure there's nothing left to replace him with." They walked into the night together, shadows stretching long behind them. In the distance, Linth's skyline pulsed like a living thing, buzzing with lies, secrets, and half-buried truths. And Elara Quinn, once the girl who believed in fairy tales, now held the story that could burn it all down. Elara had always imagined confrontation as something loud, yelling, accusations flung like stones, but when she stepped into Beau Linvale's private gallery in Linth's industrial quarter, the silence was louder than any scream. The walls were draped in white, not paint, sheets, like veils for ghosts. Behind each hung a shadowed sculpture or a distorted canvas, barely visible, distorted by fabric and suggestion. The floor creaked beneath her boots, the scent of turpentine and something burnt filling her nose. Beau was waiting. He stood at the far end of the gallery, back to her, adjusting the angle of a light above a jagged metal piece that resembled the frame of a capsized boat. His reflection shimmered faintly in the brushed steel surface. "You brought the notebook," he said, not turning. Elara didn't answer. Beau finally turned, his expression unreadable beneath his neatly trimmed beard and dark, thoughtful eyes. "You always had his eyes," he said softly, "but not his hesitation." "Don't talk about my brother like you knew him," Elara replied, voice steady. She stepped forward, holding the notebook loosely in one hand. "You used him, broke him, hid behind your art and your power, and let him carry the weight of every secret you couldn't be bothered to bury yourself." Beau studied her. "I gave him a way out. No one else did. He gave you his silence in exchange for our lives." For the first time, Beau's fat crack cracked. "He chose that path." "No, he offered it to him as the only path. That's not a choice, that's coercion." She threw the notebook down on a nearby table, the leather cover sliding across the wood. Beau didn't flinch. "So," he said, tilting his head slightly, "what is this, Elara? A warning? An accusation? Or are you hoping I will confess something before you take it to the police?" "I don't need a confession," she said. "I need to understand how many people you've done this to." Beau went out a faint laugh, almost wistful. "Do you think the world runs on honesty? On people being brave enough to face what they are? Without hiding behind art or silence or whatever else keeps them from shattering? I didn't make your brother disappear. He did." Elara shook her head. "You manipulated him into believing it was the only way to protect us, and then you fed off his guilt like it was currency." Beau approached the table, rested his hand gently on the notebook. "Do you know what guilt is, Elara? It's not a weakness. It's a tool, a compass. It tells you what matters. If Callan stayed, it was because the pain of leaving you all was less than the price of returning. That's not my fault. That's human nature." "He didn't stay," came another voice, sharper, angrier. "Lena." She stood in the entryway, dressed in black, her coat still dusted with rain. She walked into the gallery like she'd been there 100 times, and maybe she had. She continued, "He survived, and you convinced him survival was shame." Beau turned, surprised. "I wondered when you'd pick a side." "I did," Lena said. Years ago, you just never noticed it wasn't yours. She turned to Elara. I brought files, contacts, names of others who have disappeared under Beau's mentorship. Some went willingly, some didn't. Alara's breath caught. How many? Enough. Enough to get a warrant. Beau exhaled slowly, then gave them both a small, chilling smile. You think this ends with me, that I'm the monster in the center of the maze, but I'm just a symptom. No, you're the architect, Elara said, but she wasn't sure. Beau stepped back, almost respectfully. So, tear it down, but know this, Lucien Vale is mine. That identity was built here, nurtured here. If you burn this place, you don't just destroy me, you destroy what your brother became to survive. And maybe, Elara said, that's what he wants.
Outside, the rain had slowed to a mist. Lena handed Elara a flash drive as they stood beneath a flickering streetlight. Everything I have on him, she said, backed up, hidden in 3 places. Elara pocketed it. Why now? Lena hesitated. Because he went too far. Because I loved Callan enough to respect the lines he wouldn't cross. And Beau? He doesn't see lines. Only power. Elara nodded. We'll bring it to Declan, tonight. Lena looked over her shoulder, back toward the gallery. He'll retaliate. You know that, right? I'm counting on it, Elara said. It'll prove everything. Lena gave her a long look. You're not the girl who fainted at her own wedding anymore. I buried her in Baymire. She doesn't get a say in this ending. An hour later, in Declan's office back in Baymire, they spread out the evidence. Callan's notebook, Lena's files, surveillance photos, and records of financial transactions through shell gallery names tied to Beau's alias entities. Declan looked exhausted, but focused. This is enough. Not just for an investigation, for a takedown. Elara felt a hollow satisfaction, like standing on a ledge before a leap. He'll come after us. Let him, Lena said. I stopped running. Declan turned to Elara. You're sure you want this public? She thought of Jonah, of her mother, of Callan waiting in the shadows of Linth for someone to finally choose truth over silence. I don't want it, but I need it. Later that night, Elara sat alone on the porch of the Quinn boathouse. The scent of smoke still clung faintly to the beams, ghosts of fire and warning. She remembered how it once felt to believe in the safety of home, before absence became normal, before her brother's laugh became a memory she didn't trust. Behind her, the door creaked open. Callan stood there. He looked tired, older. His eyes carried the weight of someone who'd read every word of his own obituary and lived with the lie. He said the light. I left it on, she replied. Didn't want you to think it was too late. He sat beside her. The silence between them stretched, this time not in tension, but in recognition. I read the notebook, she said. I know. I'm going to expose him. You should know that. Callan nodded slowly. I won't stop you. Elara turned to him. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I thought if you knew the truth, you'd never forgive me. I haven't, she said honestly. Not completely, but I'm starting to understand it. Callan's breath hitched. I thought I'd have to carry it forever. You still might, she said, but not alone. And for the first time in years, her brother looked at her, not as Lucien Vale, not as a ghost, but as Callan Quinn. And he smiled. The sunlight in Baymire felt sharper than Elara remembered, less golden, more clinical. The boathouse still smelled faintly of smoke and brine, a scar left behind by the fire that had nearly gutted it days before. She stood by the edge of the water, her fingers tracing the scorched one of the porch railing, waiting for Declan. She didn't have to wait long. He pulled up in his cruiser, a folder tucked beneath his arm, jaw tight. When he stepped out, there was no greeting, just business. You were right, Declan said, handing over the file. 3 names from Lena's drive match missing persons reports from Linth. One of them was an artist who vanished 6 years ago. The other 2 had no ties to art at all, but all 3 were listed as mentored by Beau Linvale at some point. Elara opened the file. Photos, last known addresses, witness statements. Everything felt suddenly heavier in her hands. Will it be enough? She asked. For an investigation, yes. For an arrest,
Declan exhaled. That depends on the DA. But with Lena's testimony and Callan's, if he's willing, we've got a shot. He's ready, Elara said. He's tired of hiding. Declan gave her a long look she couldn't quite read. That makes one of you. She flinched. What's that supposed to mean? I saw Jonah yesterday. Alara's shoulders tensed. What did he say? That he doesn't know who you are anymore. That makes two of us, Declan softened slightly. He's hurting. He thought you two were building something safe. There's no such thing, Elara said quietly. Not anymore. Declan nodded, though it felt like neither of them agreed. Just understood. That evening, Jonah sat alone on the church steps, staring out toward the bay. He hadn't gone inside. The doors were open, the sanctuary lit by late summer light, but he remained on the threshold, just like he had been since the wedding that wasn't. When Elara approached, he didn't look at her. You didn't think you'd come, he said. I didn't think you'd be here, she replied. He gave a small, bitter laugh. Everyone else is picking sides. Figured I should sit still and let the storm pass. She sat beside him. There was a long pause before she spoke. You loved me because I was safe. I loved you because you knew how to build something from ruins, he corrected. Same thing, she said. I made safety look like healing. I convinced myself too. Jonah finally looked at her. Do you love him more than me? The question hung in the air. Elara blinked. This isn't about him. That's not an answer. No, she said. It's not. Because there isn't one that will fix what's broken between us. Jonah swallowed hard. Then what's left? Truth, she said simply. Even if it hurts.
Jonah stood. Then here's mine. I can't follow you down this road, Elara. I don't know where it ends, and I don't think I want to. Elara didn't cry. She only nodded. And this is goodbye. He reached out, just once, and brushed his hand against hers. For now, he said. Or maybe forever. And then he walked away. Back at the Quinn house, Mara sat at the kitchen table, staring at nothing. She didn't flinch when Elara entered. He's here, Mara said. Your brother. Elara blinked. Where? In the garage. Said he wanted to be near the tools he remembers using. Said they don't ask questions. Elara smiled faintly, then sat across from her mother. Mara's fingers trembled slightly around her teacup. You were always stronger than I gave you credit for. Elara tilted her head. Why didn't you tell me you suspected he was alive? I didn't suspect, Mara said, her voice taut. I knew. A mother knows. Then why? Because I was afraid, Wishford. If I was wrong, I'd be grieving all over again. And if I was right, I didn't know what I'd be bringing back into your life. Elara reached across the table, placing her hand over Mara's. We didn't protect each other, did we? No, Mara said. We just hid. That night, Callan stood in the garage, his hands streaked with grease, tinkering with the outboard motor of their father's old fishing boat. When Elara stepped in, he didn't stop working. You're fixing it? I figured it should run again, like something in this house should. She stood beside him. You know we're going forward with the investigation. I know. He wiped his hands. I'll testify. I'll take whatever comes. Elara studied his face. You don't have to go down for all of it. Yes, I do, he said, finally meeting her eyes, because it's the only way to come back clean. You may not get to come back at all. He shrugged. Then at least I'll stop running. Outside, headlights flared across the gravel. Lena stepped out of a borrowed car, shoulders squared, a file in her arms. It's time, she said simply. Declan met them at town hall. The public hearing was already packed. Word had spread, Baymere's golden son had returned, and he wasn't the story they thought they buried. There were whispers, reporters, even a few familiar faces with eyes full of disbelief. Elara stood at the podium, heart pounding. She looked out at the town that had shaped her, and then tried to forget her family's pain. My name is Elara Quinn, she began, and everything you've believed about my brother's death is a lie.
She spoke clearly, unwavering, of Beau's manipulation, Callan's disappearance, the criminal undercurrents masked by art and poetry. She read sections from his notebook, presented Lena's files, and handed over her own guilt, how she ignored signs, buried questions, and allowed silence to fester. When Callan stepped up beside her, he didn't look for sympathy. He only said, "I let you all believe I died because I thought it was safer than the truth. I'm not proud of that, but I'm ready to stop hiding." Gasps, murmurs, and one older woman in the front row sobbing softly. Declan delivered the official statement. An investigation was underway, a federal task force had been alerted, and Beau Linvale was now wanted for questioning. No applause, just stunned silence. But it was enough. Later, back at the boathouse, Elara sat alone beneath the stars. Callan joined her, a blanket over his shoulders. "You think they'll forgive us?" he asked. "No," I said, "but I think they'll remember us. Honestly, this time." "And Jonah?" She hesitated. "He needed a version of me I don't think exists anymore." Callan nodded. "That's also grief, isn't it?" "It is," she said, "but so is this." She gestured to the rebuilt boathouse, the files in her hand, the ocean beyond. "It's all just grief," she said, "turned into something that lets us move forward." Callan smiled faintly, ashes and echoes. And for the first time in years, Elara believed that the end of one life could be the honest beginning of another.
"Read it to me," she said. Callan hesitated, then began. "I never meant for the silence to become its own kind of violence. I thought disappearing would protect you, that cutting out the infection would save what was left. But all I did was leave you to bleed without knowing why. I became Lucian Vale because Callan Quinn was too full of shame. Lucian had purpose, control, but he also had chains. Quiet ones made of secrets and promises and debts to a man who traded pain for power. I stayed because I was scared. I stayed because Beau said if I left, you'd pay. I stayed because I thought I could handle it. I couldn't. I don't know if this letter is an apology or a confession, but it's the only truth I have left. I miss the water, the quiet before dawn. I miss being your brother, not your burden. If you're reading this, then maybe I finally found the courage to be both again." He closed the notebook. "It's not finished." "It doesn't have to be," Elara said softly. "Truth doesn't come all at once." He smiled, tired but genuine. "Will you still visit?" "When they let me," she said, "and when I'm not writing." He looked up. "Writing?" Elara nodded. "A book, maybe, or just something to make sense of all this. Not for anyone else, for me." A few weeks later, Baymere gathered again, this time not for a wedding, not for scandal, but for the town's annual Summer's End festival. Elara stood under a tent at the edge of the park, a table in front of her displaying an early draft of her memoir. It wasn't published yet, might never be, but she'd titled it anyway. Ashes and Echoes, by Elara Quinn. A few people stopped to skim the pages. Some recognized her and nodded respectfully. Others just browsed and moved on. Mara arrived mid-afternoon, walking slower than she used to, but there was something lighter in her gait. Not joy, exactly, but release. She placed a hand on Elara's shoulder. "I read it, the pages you gave me." Elara looked at her. "And?" "It hurt," Mara said. "But it's true, and that matters." They stood quietly for a while, the sounds of children laughing and seagulls overhead filling the space between them. "You know," Mara said, "your father would have hated this." Elara laughed. "The writing?" "No," Mara said with a wry smile. "The honesty." As the sun dipped below the horizon, Elara walked alone toward the docks, the same place she had once stood in a wedding dress, heart open and vulnerable. The same place the past had come crashing back again. Now she stood taller. She didn't wear white anymore. She wore blue, like the ocean before a storm, a color of depth, not purity, a color of truth. A breeze stirred, carrying the scent of seaweed and something faintly floral. Behind her, footsteps approached. Lena. "You're leaving tomorrow?" Elara asked without turning. "Back to Linth. Got a gallery to run, a life to fix." Elara turned. "Thank you for standing with me, for standing for him." Lena nodded. "He deserved it. And so did you." They watched the water for a moment. "I think I hated you when I first met you," Lena said casually. "Only at first," Elara teased. Lena smiled. "You were a threat to everything I built with him. But now I see we were both trying to save him, just in different ways." Elara nodded. "And now?" "Now," Lena said, "now we save ourselves." They shook hands. No promises, no goodbyes. Just mutual understanding. In the final days before Callan's sentencing, Elara visited Callan one more time. This time, she brought no files, no evidence, just herself. "Did you finish the letter?" he asked. "I wrote my own," she replied. She handed it to him. It wasn't long, a single page. "Callan, you disappeared to save us. I stayed to hold us together. We both survived. But now it's time to live. I don't forgive you for leaving, but I forgive you for why you did. I love you. E." Callan read it, folded it carefully, and placed it in his pocket. "See you on the other side?" he asked. She smiled. "Count on it." Weeks passed. Bo Linvale's empire crumbled. The collective disbanded. Linth began cleaning up the rot left behind. Callan's case made headlines for a week, then faded, like all scandals eventually do. Jonah never came back to Baymere. Mara started volunteering at the library, reading to children on Tuesdays. And Elara wrote. She walked by the water every morning. She lived, not in the shadow of what had been lost, but in the light of what had survived. Ashes and echoes, yes, but also hope. And from that, finally, came peace. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.